It all came to a head on a hot southern night, when Jesse stood tall against the landowner who'd sworn to crush him. The town gathered, whispering, watching as Rose stepped out from the shadows, choosing love over blood, freedom over fear. The fields seemed to hold their breath, the crickets went silent, and even the courthouse clock ticked louder than hearts could bear. One word, one touch, one defiant stand would decide if love could outlive power. And in that moment you could feel the world tilt, like history itself was waiting to see what Jesse and Rose would do next. The sun was burning down on the valley that day, hot enough to make the dirt crack and the cattle groan. Jesse stood out in the fields with sweat dripping down his back, his shirt clinging, his hands rough on the handle of the plow. He was young, no more than 20, but the years of work had carved strength into his shoulders and calluses into his palms. That land was his inheritance, his father's blood and his mother's prayers, and every furrow he dug seemed to whisper, "Hold on, boy, hold on." Life in the valley wasn't easy, but Jesse's heart beat steady with pride. He'd rise with the rooster, work till the sun melted into the hills, and come home tired but never broken. The neighbors knew him as the boy who didn't bend, the one who wouldn't sell his farm no matter how many coins were waved his way. And coins, they were waved plenty. For on the far side of the valley stood the Carter estate, grand and wide, stretching across hills like a kingdom. Mr. Carter, rich as a king and twice as stubborn, had been buying up land for years. His horses carried his men through the towns. His hand signed papers that bent judges and sheriffs alike. And now only one piece of the valley stood outside his reach, Jesse's farm. Small, yes, but planted right in the heart of the land Carter craved. Jesse never cared much for the man, but he had seen his daughter once at the market, and in that moment the world shifted. Her name was Rose. She wore a dress the color of peaches, her laugh soft, her eyes brighter than the river under the sun. Jesse had stood still, holding a sack of feed, unable to move, unable to breathe. And she had turned just once to meet his eyes. That glance was enough to plant something in Jesse's chest. Something dangerous, something wild. He didn't yet know it, but that look would pull him into a storm. One that would test his land, his love, and his very soul. The first time Jesse and Rose spoke, it was under the shade of the old oak tree by the churchyard. Jesse had been hauling water in the heat of the afternoon, his shirt damp and sticking to his back, when he saw her sitting quiet with a book in her lap. The sunlight cut through the branches, scattering gold across her hair. She looked up, startled, but her lips bent into a smile. Not the polished smile she wore in town, but a smaller one, softer, like it belonged to her alone. "You're Jesse, ain't you?" she asked, her voice carrying easy in the summer air. Jesse felt clumsy, his tongue heavy. "Yes, ma'am. And you're Mr. Carter's daughter." Something flickered in her eyes then, like sorrow caught in sunlight. "Rose," she said, her voice steady. "Just Rose." And just like that, the ground beneath Jesse seemed to shift. They spoke of small things at first, the heat, the stubbornness of the river, the peaches coming early that year. But under every word was a rhythm, a heartbeat Jesse couldn't ignore. Rose laughed once, and the sound stayed in him, rattling around long after it had faded. From that day on, they found reasons, little excuses, to meet again. Sometimes at the market, sometimes by the river, sometimes back under that oak. Jesse would tell her about the farm, about the calluses that felt like badges, about the nights he played his guitar to keep the loneliness from swallowing him whole. Rose would tell him about her father's heavy hand, about the weight of riches that never bought freedom, about how sometimes she longed to run barefoot through fields the way she did as a child. Every meeting stitched their hearts tighter, though both knew a storm was gathering. Jesse could feel it in the hush of the wind. Rose could hear it in her father's clipped words at supper. Trouble was coming. Trouble always comes when love blooms where it shouldn't. And though they tried to keep it quiet, tried to keep it theirs, trouble has ears. Trouble has eyes. And soon enough, trouble found them. Word of Jesse and Rose spread the way smoke spreads from a brush fire. Quiet at first, then faster than feet could carry. It wasn't the kind of thing you could hide for long. Not in a valley where every porch had rocking chairs and every rocking chair had a pair of eyes behind it. One farmhand, a man with more gossip than grit, carried the story straight to Mr. Carter's ear. "Your girl's been seen talkin' with that farmer boy," he said, his voice slick as oil. "They meet by the river, by the oak, sometimes after sundown." First Carter laughed, sharp and bitter. "My Rose? With that dirt boy? Foolish talk." But the next evening, when Rose came home late, cheeks flushed, eyes glowing like lanterns, Carter's laughter died. He called her into his study, the air thick with the smell of tobacco and leather. His voice cut like an axe. "You stay away from that boy." Rose lifted her chin, her hands trembling though she tried to hide it. "You can't tell me who to speak with." Carter slammed his fist against the table, the sound echoing through the walls. "I own this valley. I own every field, every road, every man in it. That boy's farm will be mine before the year is out. And I'll not have my daughter disgracing me with some dirt-scraping fool." For a moment, silence filled the room. Rose's throat burned, but her voice came out steady. "You may own land, father, but you don't own me." That night, Rose ran to the river, the hem of her dress tearing on briars. Jesse was waiting, his guitar across his knees, plucking a low tune to the moon. She fell into his arms, her voice breaking. "He knows," she whispered. "He said he'll ruin you, said he'll take your farm." Jesse held her close, his heart pounding like a drum. "Let him try," he said, his voice steady though fear gnawed at him inside. And from that night on, their love was no longer just a secret, it was a rebellion. Mr. Carter was not a man who let go of a grudge. Once the thought of Jesse had lodged in his mind, it grew roots. He started small, the way men with power often do. First came the whispers in town. Merchants who once greeted Jesse with smiles now turned stiff. Storekeepers raised their prices when he walked in, and some flat out refused to sell him seed or tools. "Nothing personal, Jesse," they muttered, eyes sliding away. "Just business." But Jesse knew whose hand was twisting behind it all. Next came the neighbors. Folks who used to wave from their porches now ducked inside when Jesse passed. The ones who once borrowed his plow or drank his cider grew cold. Carter's shadow stretched long, and in that shadow, Jesse found himself standing alone. Still, Jesse held on. He woke before dawn, pushed his body harder, worked the fields till his muscles screamed. He wouldn't let Carter win easy. And through it all, Rose came. She brought bread wrapped in cloth, water cool from the spring, and laughter that cut through the weight pressing on his chest. One evening, they met under the oak again. Rose's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "He's not stopping, Jesse," she whispered. "He said if I keep seeing you, he'll send me away, far away, to live with my aunt across the state." Jesse's hand found hers, rough against soft. "Then we'll find a way, Rose. If he pushes, we'll push back harder." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "You don't know him like I do. He doesn't fight to win. He fights to destroy." Jesse stared out toward the horizon, where the last light of day bled into night. "Then he'll have to break me to do it. And I ain't breakin' easy." The crickets sang louder, the wind hushed. And though neither spoke it aloud, they both felt the truth settle heavy between them. The storm was not coming. It was already here. It started one night, deep in the dark when the valley lay quiet. Jesse woke to the sound of hooves pounding, dogs barking wild, and men's voices cutting sharp through the night air. He grabbed his shotgun and ran out barefoot, the gravel biting into his feet. By the time he reached the yard, the damage was done. His fence lay splintered, the barn door hung from one hinge, and his cattle had been driven off into the woods. The men were gone, their laughter trailing into the night like ghosts. Jesse stood there, chest heaving, anger burning hotter than fire. On his door he found a note, nailed deep into the wood. "Sell, or watch everything you love burn." He crumpled it in his fist. Every bone in him screamed to storm up to the Carter house, to throw the note at the man's feet, to fight him with fists and fury. But another thought held him back. The image of Rose, her eyes wet, her voice trembling. If he rushed blind into Carter's grip, He'd lose more than land. He'd lose her. The next morning, Jesse set out on foot to round up what cattle he could find. Hours later, Rose came running down the dirt path to meet him, her face pale with fear. "I heard him," she whispered, clutching Jesse's arm. "He's not just sending men. He's bringing the law. He's gonna claim you owe debts you don't owe. He's already bribed the judge. He means to bury you, Jesse." Jesse stared at her, his jaw tight, the weight of the valley pressing on him. "Then I'll fight him in the courts if I must. I'll fight him in the fields. I'll fight him wherever he comes. But I won't give him this land." Rose's grip tightened, her heart racing against his arm. "He won't stop until he breaks you." Jesse's eyes lifted to the horizon, where thunderclouds gathered like bruises in the sky. His voice was low, steady as stone. "Then let him try." And so the battle sharpened, not just of land, but of wills. A farmer's son against a king of the valley. Love against power. And both sides knew one would bend or one would break. Carter didn't waste time. Within a week, a man in a long black coat rode up Jesse's road carrying a folded paper stamped with red wax. He didn't bother with greetings. He stepped off his horse, handed Jesse the paper, and said in a flat voice, "You've been served." Jesse broke the seal with calloused fingers. The words inside were thick with law talk, but the meaning cut clear enough. Carter was claiming Jesse's farm against unpaid debts. Debts Jesse knew he didn't owe. Jesse's stomach turned, but he stood tall. "You tell your master I'll see him in court." The man smirked. "Court already belongs to him, farmer." Then he mounted his horse and rode off, dust curling in his wake. That night, Jesse sat on his porch, the paper crumpled on his knee. His mama's old Bible sat beside him, the one she used to read when storms came. He thumbed its pages, searching for strength, for fire. But fear kept whispering, "He owns the judge, Jesse. He owns them all." Rose came after dark, her steps light, her face shadowed by the moon. She sat beside him, her hand brushing his. "I heard," she whispered. Jesse's jaw clenched. "He's using lies to take what my daddy built with his bare hands. If the judge sides with him, I'll lose everything." Rose's voice trembled. "Then let me help. Let me speak." He turned to her, eyes hard. "If you stand against him, he'll break you too. He'll lock you away or worse. I can't let that happen." Rose lifted her chin, fire flashing in her eyes. "You're not the only one with something to fight for. I won't be silent." The night was still, but the weight between them was heavy. Jesse looked out at the fields stretching under the stars. The corn rose, the soil, the sweat of generations. "This land's my blood," he said softly. "And I won't give it up, Rose. Not to him. Not to anyone." And in that moment they both knew the courtroom would be no place for justice. It would be another battlefield. The morning of the court hearing, Jesse hitched his mule to the wagon and rode into town. The streets were already thick with folks, whispers chasing him like shadows. He could feel their eyes on his back, the poor farmer standing up to the richest man in 3 counties. Some looked at him with pity, others with fear, but not a soul dared speak. When Jesse stepped into the courthouse, the air was heavy with polished wood and dust. The judge sat high on his bench, robes too fine for such a small town. Carter was already there, dressed sharp, his silver watch gleaming, his lawyer at his side. Rose sat in the back row, her face pale but her eyes steady on Jesse. The judge banged his gavel. "This court is in session." Carter's lawyer stood first, his voice slick as oil. He read from papers, waved documents, spoke of debts, signatures, missing payments. He painted Jesse as careless, reckless, unfit to hold land. Every word was laced with lies, but every lie slid smooth, like butter across bread. When it was Jesse's turn, he rose slow, his hat clutched in his hands. His voice carried plain and steady. "Your Honor, this land was bought fair by my father, paid for in full. I've worked it every day since. I never signed no loan, never owed no debt. What Carter's saying is false." The judge's face was unreadable. Carter leaned back in his chair, a faint smile pulling at his lips. He already knew which way the wind blew. But then Rose stood. Her voice cut across the room like a bell. "That's a lie," she said, trembling but strong. "I've seen the papers my father keeps. He forged Jesse's name. He's trying to steal what isn't his." The room gasped. Carter's head snapped toward her, fury blazing in his eyes. The judge pounded his gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" Rose's voice wavered, but she pressed on. "You all know what kind of man he is. He buys, he bribes, he bends the law. But some things don't belong to him, and Jesse's farm is one of them." The courtroom fell to a hush. The judge stared hard at Rose, then at Carter. For a moment, it seemed the truth might crack through the walls Carter built. But then the gavel struck again. "Enough," the judge said, his voice cold. "The court will recess. A ruling will be made tomorrow." Jesse's heart sank. He could see it plain, the judge's eyes, the weight of Carter's gold pressing heavy. Justice was slipping through his fingers. And yet, when he looked back at Rose, standing there with fire in her eyes, he felt something stronger than fear. He felt hope. The courthouse emptied out slow, like a church after a bitter sermon. Folks whispered as they slipped into the sunlight, eyes darting between Carter's stony face and Rose's trembling frame. Jesse walked her out, his hand brushing hers for just a second. "You shouldn't have done that," he said softly, though pride swelled in his chest. Rose lifted her chin. Somebody had to. Across the street, Carter stood with his lawyer, his hat pulled low, his mouth tight as a trap. He didn't speak, didn't shout, didn't curse. He just stared at Rose with eyes like cold iron. And sometimes silence is sharper than a blade. That night, Rose returned home to a house heavy with quiet. Supper sat untouched on the long oak table. Carter was waiting in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand, the lamp casting shadows across his face. "Close the door," he said, his voice low. Rose obeyed, her heartbeat quickening. "You made a fool of me today." His words were calm, too calm. "Do you know what happens when a man in my position is made to look weak?" Rose's hands shook, but she steadied her voice. "The truth happened. I couldn't sit silent while you lied." Carter set his glass down hard, the sound sharp as a gunshot. "You think that boy can save you? He's dirt, Rose. Dirt under your shoes. And I'll bury him deep enough you'll forget his name." Rose's breath caught, but she didn't bend. "You can ruin his fields, you can buy your judges, but you can't break him. And you can't break me." For a moment, father and daughter stood locked in silence, the air thick with rage and sorrow. Then Carter leaned back in his chair, his voice a whisper like the hiss of a snake. "If you walk out this door again to see him, you will not come back. Not to this house. Not to my name." Rose's chest ached, tears burning her eyes. She turned without another word, climbed the stairs and packed a small bag. That night, while the house slept, she slipped out into the dark, her steps carrying her down the long road to Jesse's farm. When Jesse opened the door and saw her there, hair loose, eyes red, bag in hand, his breath caught. "Rose." She dropped the bag on the porch. "If I stay, he'll destroy us both. If I leave, maybe we stand a chance." The crickets sang. The moon hung heavy, and Jesse knew, as he pulled her into his arms, that the fight had just risen higher than land or law. It was now a battle for love itself. By dawn, the news had spread like fire through dry corn. Rose Carter, daughter of the richest landowner in the county, had left her father's big white house and gone straight to the farmhouse of Jesse Miller. Folks gathered in the general store, in the churchyard, by the water pump, every tongue wagging, every whisper sharper than the last. "Did you hear? She went to him. In the night. Lord have mercy. Carter won't stand for that." By mid-morning, Jesse's farmyard was no longer just fields and chickens. It was a stage, and the whole town was watching from the shadows. Inside, Rose sat by the window, clutching her bag. Jesse stood near the doorway, his jaw tight, his hands restless. "You don't have to stay," he said, though his voice trembled. "I don't want you to lose everything because of me." Rose turned, her eyes steady despite the storm within her. I already lost everything. My home, my name, my father's love. What else is there left to lose? Except you. Jesse's chest ached at her words. He knelt before her, rough hands covering hers. Then you'll never lose me. Not while I breathe. But promises don't stop rumors. And by noon the first stone was thrown. Not by hand, but by word. The preacher's wife said Rose had shamed herself. The blacksmith claimed Jesse had bewitched her. A group of Carter's men spread word that Jesse was a thief of hearts and homes. And behind it all, Carter's shadow loomed like a storm cloud. That evening, the sheriff rode up to Jesse's farm. He sat tall on his horse, his badge catching the sunset glow. Jesse, he called, voice grave. Mr. Carter's filed a complaint. Says you stole his daughter. Rose stepped outside before Jesse could answer, her voice ringing clear. Nobody stole me. I walked here myself. The sheriff shifted in his saddle, unease in his eyes. That may be, miss, but the law don't care much for how it looks. And right now it looks bad. The yard fell silent. Crickets stilled. Even the wind seemed to wait. Jesse felt the weight of 1,000 eyes. The town, the law, Carter himself. All pressing down on him. But he reached for Rose's hand, held it firm and said, she stays. Whatever comes, she stays. And from the woods beyond the fields, unseen, one of Carter's men slipped away to carry the message back. The girl has chosen. And the boy stands ready to burn for her. Carter didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study with maps and deeds spread before him, a bottle drained to its bottom, and hate burning hotter than any lamp. His daughter had defied him. His daughter had walked into the arms of the very boy he meant to bury. Fine, he muttered, voice low and mean. If she wants the dirt, let her have it. Let her see what happens when the dirt turns to dust. By sunrise, Carter made his move. Not with fists, not with shouting, but with the quiet cruelty of a man who owned half the county. First, he called in debts. Farmers who owed him seed money, wagon repairs, or land rent suddenly found themselves on the edge of ruin. And he whispered in their ears, stand with Jesse, and I'll take what little you got left. Second, he sent word to the storekeeper. No more supplies for Jesse Miller. No flour, no nails, no rope. Cut him off, Carter said, or I'll cut you out. Third, he sent 2 men to ride the borders of Jesse's farm, just to remind him. Carter's eyes are always watching. That same day, Jesse and Rose worked in the fields, side by side. Rose's hands blistered on the hoe, her dress streaked with sweat and dirt, but she kept going, her eyes hard. Rose, Jesse said, pausing to wipe his brow. You don't have to. Yes, I do, she cut in firm. If I can't work this land with you, then I don't deserve to call it home. But by noon, when Jesse went to fetch water from the well, he found the rope gone and the bucket sunk deep beyond reach. By evening, when he tried to buy cornmeal from the store, the shopkeeper shook his head, muttering, orders, Jesse. My hands are tied. Rose watched him come home empty-handed, his jaw tight, his pride bleeding. They're closing in, Jesse said, voice low. He means to starve us out. Rose placed her hands on his shoulders, her eyes steady. Then we'll find another way. He can take the rope, he can take the cornmeal, but he can't take what's between us. Yet deep in the woods, Carter's men watched with quiet smiles. Because Carter didn't just want Jesse hungry, he wanted Jesse broken. And he wasn't done yet. The sun rose, but for Jesse and Rose it felt more like a shadow spreading across the farm. The animals grew restless. The corn drooped for lack of rain, and every road seemed to lead to Carter's hand. Still, they refused to bend. Jesse rose early, muscles aching, hands blistered. Rose followed, her dress torn at the hem, hair tied back with a strip of cloth. Side by side they worked, side by side they endured. But hunger has a way of gnawing at more than the belly. By the third day without supplies, Jesse's temper began to fray. At the supper table, a table bare but for boiled turnips, he slammed his fist down. This ain't right, Rose. He's choking us, and the whole town's letting him do it. Rose flinched but did not back away. Then we fight back, Jesse. Not with fists, with courage, with truth. Jesse shook his head, eyes dark. Truth don't fill the stomach. Truth don't keep the sheriff from hauling me off on lies. But even as the weight of despair pressed down, help came from a place he never expected. That night, a knock rattled the door. Jesse opened it slow, half expecting Carter's men. Instead, it was old Martha, the midwife who'd delivered half the town. Her eyes were sharp, her hands calloused, her back bent but unbroken. "I brung you this," she said, handing over a sack of flour and a jug of milk. "Don't ask where from. Just know not everybody's forgotten what Carter's done to folks." Jesse blinked, his throat tight. "Martha, he'll come after you if he finds out." She spat to the side. "Let him. I've been standing up to men like him longer than you've been alive." When she left, Rose set the flour on the table with trembling hands. "See, Jesse? We're not alone. People are watching. People are waiting for someone to stand against him." And though Jesse's heart swelled, he knew the risk. Carter's eyes were everywhere, his reach long. One sack of flour might give them bread for a night, but it might also draw fire on every soul who dared to help. As the lamp burned low, Jesse looked at Rose and whispered, "If he can't break us, he'll come harder. He'll come meaner. And when he does, we best be ready." In the dark, the crickets sang, but even their song seemed to carry a warning. The storm ain't over. The storm's just begun. Carter learned fast. He always did. Like a hawk in the sky, he circled, he watched, and he saw who dared flutter out of line. By the week's end, he knew about old Martha's visit, knew about the sack of flour, knew about the whispers that spread through town. Quiet folks daring to hope Jesse and Rose might stand against him. Carter's anger didn't come loud, came cold. He summoned the sheriff, his lawyer, and 3 men loyal enough to do whatever he asked. "Teach them what it costs," Carter said, voice flat as steel. "Every hand that feeds Jesse Miller must feel the hunger too." The next morning, Martha's porch was set ablaze. She woke coughing on smoke, neighbors rushing to pull water from the pump. But the fire licked away her rocking chair, her herb shelf, her quilts. Nobody saw who lit the torch, but everyone knew. By noon, the town buzzed with fear. Folks who had whispered in Jesse's favor now kept their heads down, eyes averted. Even the preacher, who'd once spoken of truth and justice, stayed silent in the pulpit that Sunday, his sermon soft and hollow. Meanwhile, Jesse and Rose worked the fields, unaware of the fire until Martha herself arrived, soot on her dress, fury in her eyes. "They burned me out," she spat, voice rough. "That man won't stop till every last one of us bows. You hear me, Jesse? You better not bow." Jesse's fists clenched, his chest burning hot with rage. But Rose stepped forward, taking Martha's hand. "We won't bow. Not now, not ever. Even if we have to fight with nothing but our voices." That night, Jesse couldn't sleep. He paced the porch, the stars sharp above him, the cicadas screaming in the dark. Rage and fear pulled him in 2 directions. Rose found him there, leaning on the rail, fists tight. "Jesse," she said softly, "what's in your heart?" He looked at her, eyes full of storm. To take back what he stole. To make him answer for every acre, every family, every soul he's crushed. Rose touched his arm, her voice steady though her heart trembled. "Then we start with truth. We tell the town what he's done. We tell them all. He wins by fear. We fight by light." Jesse breathed deep, her words filling him like fire in the veins. "Then tomorrow we stand, not just for us, for everybody." And though fear curled in the shadows, something else began to stir that night. Something Carter could not buy, could not burn, could not bend. Hope. The morning broke hot and heavy, a sky the color of iron pressing down on the valley. Jesse rose before the rooster crowed, shoulders squared, jaw set like stone. Rose stood with him, her hand slipping into his as if to say, "I'll walk wherever this road leads." They hitched the mule and rolled into town with a wagon empty of goods but heavy with purpose. By the time they reached the square, Folks were already gathering. Farmers in sweat-stained hats, shopkeepers wiping their hands on aprons, wives with baskets dangling from their arms. And behind them, always behind them, Carter's men watching with cold eyes. Jesse climbed onto the wagon bed, his boots creaking on the wood. Rose stood below, her face lifted, her hair catching the sun like a flame. For a moment, Jesse's voice caught in his throat. But then he remembered the fire on Martha's porch, the empty shelves in their kitchen, the hunger gnawing at their bellies. He raised his voice so all could hear. Neighbors, friends, you all know what's been done. You've seen farms swallowed up, debts twisted like ropes round a man's neck. You've seen fires lit in the dark, not by the Lord's hand, but by Carter's. He owns the store, he owns the law, and now he wants to own us. But I say no more. The words rolled out like thunder, and for a heartbeat, silence filled the square. Folks shifted, glanced at one another, hearts pounding with a mix of fear and longing. Then Rose stepped forward, her voice clear as a bell. He calls Jesse dirt, says he's nothing. But I tell you, this soil is where life begins. Soil feeds us, holds us, gives us bread. And if Jesse is dirt, then I'll stand in that dirt with him, because it's more honest than all the gold Carters piled on lies. A murmur rose, soft at first, then stronger. Old men nodding, women whispering, young boys clenching fists. For a moment, the town remembered its spine. But Carter had been waiting. From the courthouse steps, he strode forward, his black coat flapping, his voice booming like a judge's gavel. Enough, he thundered. You dare accuse me, Jesse Miller? You, a boy scratching at the earth, speaking against a man who's given you jobs, roads, a store to feed your families? You speak rebellion, and rebellion has a cost. He turned to the sheriff, standing pale beside him. Do your duty. The sheriff hesitated, hat in hand, sweat rolling down his temple. The crowd held its breath. Jesse's fists tightened. Rose's heart raced. And then the sheriff spoke, voice trembling. Mr. Carter, law says I can't take a man for speaking truth. Not yet. The crowd stirred, a ripple of courage moving like wind through wheat. Carter's face darkened, his jaw stiff. This isn't over, he hissed, eyes cutting like knives toward Jesse and Rose. Not by a mile. And as Carter turned back to his men, Jesse felt it. The shift in the air, small but real. Fear was still there, yes, but so was something stronger now. The town had heard. And once folks hear the truth, they can't unhear it. Carter rode home from the square that day with silence so heavy even his horse seemed to feel it. His men trailed behind, uneasy, glancing at their master's back. They'd seen something rare. Carter challenged in public. Carter left without the last word. By nightfall, he was already scheming. He summoned his lawyer, spread maps across his desk, and tapped his finger on Jesse's land. Burning a porch is too small, he muttered. Cutting supplies is too slow. It's time we make an example. The lawyer leaned in, nervous. What do you mean, Mr. Carter? Carter's eyes glinted hard as steel. If the law won't silence him, the land will. I'll choke his farm dry. Water rights, seed orders, even the road that leads to his field. I own it all. If Jesse Miller wants to stand, let him stand starving in dust. And Carter moved fast. By week's end, the mill refused to grind Jesse's corn. The seed merchant turned him away with a pale face. And when Jesse tried to take his wagon down the road to fetch water from the creek, he found Carter's men blocking the path, rifles across their laps. You'll need permission now, one sneered. Jesse went home empty-handed, shoulders heavy, but his spirit unbroken. Rose met him on the porch, her eyes searching his face. What's he done now? Jesse's voice was low, steady. He's closing every door but one. If we're to survive, Rose, we'll need the town to open theirs. That night, they lit a single lamp in the farmhouse window, a signal they hoped others might see. And sure enough, one by one, neighbors came under cover of dark. A sack of beans, a jug of milk, a bundle of firewood. Each gift small, each risk great. And for every quiet knock on Jesse's door, Carter's fury deepened. His grip tightened, because he knew the one thing he feared most was slipping: his power over the hearts of the people. In the stillness after midnight, Jesse sat awake at the kitchen table, Rose's head resting on his shoulder. "Rose," he whispered, "he means to break us through the land, but maybe the land ain't what saves us." She stirred, eyes opening slow. "Then what, Jesse?" He kissed her hair and answered, the people will." And outside, under the same moon, Carter stared out his window with a glass of whiskey in hand and muttered, "Then the people will learn fear again." The summer air pressed thick as a quilt, and the whole town felt it, like something about to break. Carter had grown restless, his pride torn, his name whispered in corners where once it was feared. And when a man like Carter feels his grip slipping, he doesn't loosen it. He squeezes tighter. So he called a meeting at the courthouse, sent word through every farm, every shop, every kitchen. "Come, or be counted against me." By sundown the square was filled. The bell tolled slow, the air still as stone. Jesse and Rose stood hand in hand near the steps, their faces pale but firm. Carter took the stand, black coat sharp, voice booming like thunder. "You all know me. You know the roads I built, the store I filled, the law I kept steady." And yet, his eyes cut to Jesse. "A boy with dirt on his boots dares turn you against me. A girl I raised dares shame my name. If this town will stand with them, then this town will learn what it costs." The crowd murmured, shifting uneasy. Mothers held children close, men tightened their hats. Fear was thick, but so was something else, something stirring under the fear. Jesse climbed the steps, his boots loud against the wood. He turned to face the people, not Carter. "Neighbors," he said, voice strong though his chest shook. "He says he gave you roads, but you paid for them. He says he fed you, but you worked for it. And every gift he brags about came with chains. Look around, how many farms lost? How many names buried under debts that never should have been?" He paused. Let the silence stretch. Let the truth sink deep. Carter owns the store. He owns the fields. He owns the law. But he does not own us. Not unless we let him. And I say we don't let him no more. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then old Martha stepped forward, soot still marking her face from the fire Carter's men had set. She raised her hand, voice rough but clear. "I stand with Jesse." Then another voice, the blacksmith. "I stand too." Then the preacher, slow but steady. "The Lord don't bless a man who breaks the weak." "I stand." And like rain breaking after drought, voices rose, 1, then 10, then 50. The square thundered with it. "We stand. We stand. We stand." Carter's face blazed red, his hands fists at his side. "You'll regret this," he roared. "I built this town. I made you all." But the sheriff stepped forward, his badge catching the last glow of sunset. He looked Carter dead in the eye and said, "You don't own this town anymore." Silence. Heavy, final. Carter's power cracked that night. Not with a gunshot, not with fire, but with the sound of a people remembering they were free. Rose pressed close to Jesse, tears shining in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "No," Jesse said, his hand wrapping hers, voice soft as the cicadas beginning their song. "We all did it. Together." Carter left the square that night alone, his shadow long, his name hollow. The town he once ruled by fear now stood taller than his wealth, louder than his threats. And as the stars lit the dark sky, Jesse and Rose walked home through fields that seemed greener, soil that seemed richer, air that seemed freer. For love had planted its roots deeper than Carter's greed ever could. And folks on porches, years later, would still tell it in the summer dusk. How a farmer's son and a landowner's daughter stood hand in hand, and how truth, slow as seed, strong as oak, outlasted the lies of a mighty man.